players with a lot of pedigree.
Yeah, and on the other side of things, they've just gone into the game, so I can't read off the. I can't read off the.
I mean, people like Clown and Landeb, they've been around for a while. Like, those are known players. It's not like these guys.
They are known players, but they've also got a couple of sort of up and coming players who aren't necessarily new. But Kaldemar, for example, has been playing C# for a while now. And anyway, we're moving into the game here. It's Rainmaker on Sturgeon Shipyard. We've got Oblivion on the right side of the map here, trying to establish a bit of position, but they're being fended off nicely by the Synergy sloshing machine. So Tim, is that Tim on sloshing machine? That's an
I think that is Tim on sloshing machine. Yeah, he's typically known for going shooters, but we see a lot of people playing flex roles in Splatoon 2. In general, you really need to make sure that people, especially aren't your exact front line, need to be able to play some different types of weapons. And what seemed like was going to be a decent situation for Synergy at the top of the map there ends up being fended off by Oblivion. A couple picks back and forth kind of stop much momentum. The Rainmaker is picked up, but I don't really see it being pushed too far. Yeah, exactly. It's almost immediately taken out as Tim just tries to hold on to this. It's a 3v4 situation for Synergy, so they are going to be pushed back here. It's up to Oblivion to get some picks.
Yeah, and this team comp, while we've got a bit of a stalemate going on right now, there's it's kind of interesting that the Rapid Pro and Blaster and Slosher, so they're sort of the intended to be the frontline weapons by the looks of things, as Nas gets a nice pick on the Inkjet, then gets taken out by the Slosher. I was about to say, the Slosher and the Rapid Pro have quite a lot of range on them, especially when compared to the Sloshing Machine and the Tri-Slosher. And you can sort of see that that's allowed Oblivion to move up really easily. Like, they aren't really afraid of getting traded out here. They've got a nice push past the halfway point to the goal, down to 48. But you can see here that it's so easy for Oblivion to just essentially wait for Synergy to make a move and then punish them for it. So the aggression that we spoke about at the start is definitely being checked well for the time being.
Yeah, definitely. And something else that I want to point out, that you just reminded me about that Slosher. I forget exactly what his name is on Oblivion, but I do know that he has been basically maining vanilla Slosher for a long time now, and now that missile buff happened, he kind of like has more of a reason to use it in tournament. So the fact that we kind of saw like that oppression, using the range of the Slosher, using those missiles with his team, this is all stuff that he's used to doing. It's not like he just picked up the vanilla Slosher today because missile just got buffed. So expect to kind of see some more educated decision making from him with that Slosher.
Yeah, and we see this is an interesting situation here because Oblivion used their specials very, very early just before, and the Slosher barely survives long enough to get the pick on the Rainmaker, but this is still very dangerous territory here. Mark Deb is the only one alive to stop the Rainmaker and can't quite do it. Synergy pushing all the way in. So what happened there was Oblivion used their specials a little bit too early. You could see them sort of setting up to defend the Rainmaker push, and then suddenly the Inkjet and I believe it was the Tenor missiles just coming out at the same time there. And unfortunately, it was too early, and the Rainmaker stayed alive and let Synergy get back into a 4v4 situation, which they promptly pushed with their own specials. And you could see, just like we were talking about at the start, Synergy got one push, and that was all they needed to get to 13 remaining.
Yeah, and like, of course, we always say in Rainmaker, any lead that isn't a knockout isn't really safe, but just considering the way this matchup's been going so far, it's going to be very difficult for Oblivion to push that Rainmaker to 12 with only 1 minute and 30 left on the clock, especially since they're going to have a more kind of frantic rush play, almost forced pace to try to do this, because in order for them to actually get this set up, they're probably going to have to spend the next 30 to 40 seconds getting the Rainmaker in a position where it can die and then be popped again and pushed. Now, the missiles are going off. They are starting to get this ready. They know that they're going to have to deal with this Stingray, as unfortunately another member of Oblivion goes down. So now it's a 3v4 situation, but the Stingray is being used, so this actually is a little bit of potential for Oblivion to get something going. Now that they don't have a Stingray to deal with, if they get some picks, they should be able to make something of it, but unfortunately, they are going down again. So with only a minute left, they really need to make sure that they are not losing members constantly as they have been. They need to get a few picks. They need to get some momentum to get that Rainmaker to the other side of the level.
Yeah, and you can also see with Synergy, as Fresbit unfortunately falls off the map there, Synergy has really, they definitely know what they're going for with this team comp. You can see there are 3 Stingrays available for them. They've got the Squeezer, the heavy Splatling, and the Sloshing Machine. Now, the Sloshing Machine isn't exactly the fastest Stingray builder in the game, but they always have a Stingray available to them. You can see Ant's been sitting on this Stingray for close to a minute now, and now he jumps out, and he's going to be having that Stingray at the ready. even if Oblivion manages to get a foothold here. There's only 20 seconds left, so it's going to be very difficult for Oblivion to make anything happen here.
Yeah, it's almost as if Synergy's like, you know what? We have really good individually skilled players. We're just going to throw 3 Stingrays on this team comp. We're going to just get a bunch of picks like normal, and when we have to defend, we're going to have like 19 Stingrays, so easy peasy.
Well, they had 19 Stingrays, but 1 was enough, and we can see it exactly like we were saying. Oblivion seemed to have a decent hold on the game for a little while there, but they slipped up once, and Synergy takes the first game with a very decisive win on Rainmaker Surgeon Shipyard. You can see Tim and Naz both definitely holding their own there with the picks we don't normally expect from them. Naz normally a sniper player, and Tim definitely known for his 10 attack.
Yeah,
but obviously that individual skill that they're so known for translates over to just about anything they choose to pick up.
You know, the Tri-Slasher pick is kind of funny because, you know, we talked about how a lot of these people in Synergy, they don't play the game for long periods of time, and they kind of come back just to practice for events like this. And if you can remember when the game first came out, you know, and everyone's like, oh man, you know, Chargers aren't good right now. But the Tri-Slasher's overpowered, and it's pretty easy. You had a lot of Chargers just pick up Tri-Slasher. So it's almost as if Naz still has that pick because he really hasn't moved that much forward since the meta when the game first came out as far as weapon picks, and he's just going to be Tri-Slasher.
Sort of just flashbacks to 2017. We've got the sloshing machine and the Tri-Slosher going at it. Anyway, this is definitely not 2017. It's Splat Zones on Wahoo World, one of the most recent maps to come out. And so Splat Zones, I think, is where Oblivion is more likely to get that the sort of defensive sort of teamwork kind of thing going.
Last game, if we kind of pretended last game was more of a Splat Zones match, Oblivion kind of controlled the center of the stage more than Synergy did. Synergy had that really devastating push that we talked about, but they didn't quite have map control. Again, that wasn't their objective in that match, so things can go, you know, kind of differently. But as we kind of go into this next match, we'll just see if the difference in game mode kind of comes into play like we're expecting it to.
Okay. Sorry. So I was sort of getting at that point there where it's just definitely the way that Oblivion was playing that last game, you could definitely tell that the Splat Zones, like if it were Splat Zones, it would definitely worked out a lot better for them. At the same time, though, I somehow doubt that Synergy would run 3 Stingrays on Splat Zones, so there's also that kind of element to it. But at the same time, it does seem as though Oblivion's much more comfortable playing that kind of, okay, we'll get picks and we'll take mid control kind of thing. Like they've got that step definitely down pat, and that's definitely the most important part of Splat Zones is being able to control the Splat Zone and knowing what to do after that. So we'll have to see how much that plays into things now. Because essentially, like that last game, I think if you're Oblivion, you look at that and say, well, you know, we lost, but it wasn't as though we can't beat these guys. You know? Yeah, no, that's definitely how I would be feeling in that kind of situation too. You know, there was a lot of back and forth. It really came down to that one push that you know made the difference. And I feel that if you're Oblivion, if you think that, you know, hey, we can kind of do exactly what we did last game without the mistake, with maybe like 1 or 2 more situations where we get some picks, and it's gonna work out for us. Now I do have the video feed up, just to double check. I'm at in-game time about 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Okay, I'm a little bit behind that, but we'll make do. Okay, so we've got Oblivion in control right now. It's Synergy has had the zone for a little while there, and you can see that they briefly took the zone back.
Oh, and look at that bubble push. As well, they have the bubble blower on the heavy deco, and then they have the bomb rush on the fire fin. So both Resbit and Nas using those long range weapons. I mean, that kind of seems like an intentional Splat Zones kind of thing going on. While they actually have a Junior and a slashing machine Neo, so lots of special control on zone. And then they have that Junior, and this kind of seems like the same thing as last time. They go 3 of the same thing that makes sense for the game mode, and they rely on their individual skill to kind of win them situations outside from that. But the problem right now is that Oblivion has been outslaying them. So they really can't, just outslay and then use their specials that are tailored for this mode to kind of play objective because they're not getting the slay. So it's really up to them to make this kind of unorthodox comp work. They have the 2 long-range weapons, a junior which isn't very good at getting kills, and a machine which, to be honest, actually can be a pretty decent slaying weapon. But if you don't really have the support that you need with the paint and such, it could be pretty hard. Now, as Synergy does finally get a clean, bunch of kills, they do get the zone. Let's see if they're actually able to turn this into a lead because they have a lot of time on the clock to be able to shave off.
Yeah, and you could sort of see while we were getting our stream sort of set back up, it seemed as though Synergy is doing a really good job of getting their specials onto the zone, but nice double kill there from Ant.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming that was the splat bomb.
Bomb,
yeah. Triple, in fact. So Synergy does take the lead, and it's essentially what was happening before this point was that Synergy would get their specials on the zone, but then they wouldn't follow up with any kind of offensive pressure to get Oblivion off the zone, so Oblivion would just come straight back in. But now you can see that the picks are coming in. Resbit's got his bubbles all ready to go just to recap the zone.
Just to make sure that it's very hard to recap at the end, yeah. Well, it might happen, though.
The splashdown might be enough to...
They gotta outpaint this bomb rush?
No. It's not happening. It's just not happening. There's too much paint on the zone from all the specials, and Synergy takes a somewhat less decisive but still very commanding 2-0 lead in the series.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about. It's just they're going to go back and forth, and then Synergy's going to have that one hold that really puts a complete halt on Oblivion's ability to win the game. It just... and again, that was in Oblivion's grasp. I mean, we both saw how they had, they had 2 stretches of control in the zone. When Synergy first got control of the zone, they had a lot of difficulty. And I mean, it could have also been, kind of their comp, right? Because we talked about how they would get control of the zone and they wouldn't really follow with offensive pressure. If the machine and/or the junior dies, and the people that are remaining are all the long-range weapons, it's kind of difficult for them to kind of slay forward. But despite that, Oblivion. They almost got the zone at the end there. They barely didn't outpaint the bomb rush. In fact, I'm pretty sure if that splashdown had been a little bit closer to the center of the stage, it would have capped the zone and given Oblivion a second chance, but it didn't happen. And once again, Synergy just had one nice hold that won them the game, despite being back and forth aside from that single hold.
Yeah, you could sort of see that the penalties are starting to stack up a little bit with all the bubbles and whatnot coming in to just, cap the zone for a couple of seconds, and then the moment that Synergy got a decent hold off and then got the picks directly afterward, that was when things started getting really dicey for Oblivion. They couldn't get back in with their somewhat long-range focused comp with, for example, the Rapid Blast Pro. And meanwhile, Synergy just had a field day. They had the close-range weapons ready to just sit below the platforms in Oblivion's base and just shark everything that came down. So... And I think that long-range, short-range kind of thing where the short-range weapons have a lot of trouble getting in, but once they're in, they're so damn annoying to get rid of with a long-range weapon. That I think is I think that's one of the sort of things that's really common in this current metagame, where everyone's running these kinds of comps that, you've got the Rapid Pro, you've got the Heavy Splatling, you've got all these long range weapons and
Squeezer, foil squeezer and stuff like that. Yeah, it's I mean, Splatoon 2 compared to Splatoon 1 has been really heavily focused on these kind of splash damage and chunk damage. Not quite chip damage, but chunk damage, right? It's the difference. Chip damage is you kind of have a tiny little bit of damage shaved off here, a tiny little bit of damage shaved off there that kind of adds up to something. Whereas the chunk damage is more you get hit by one hitbox and it takes you for 40 to 60% of your health. That way someone else walks up and they just get an immediate kill on you. Wasn't as important in Splat 1 because in Splat 1 things were a lot faster paced. You needed to really get individual kills quickly to keep up with the way quick response stealth jump worked. And while combining fire was obviously important, the kind of the methods and the ways that it worked together wasn't as important. Whereas in Splat 2, you had this more emphasis on the slightly slower pace. Quick response stealth jump doesn't give you as much momentum. It works better on defense, obviously, naturally, and it does work on offense, but it really makes individual fights more important. So having that kind of teamwork where you're actually now more specifically gearing your team comp to make sure that when these two players shoot at each other, they're going to get that kill. You know, they're going to get that pick. And that is kind of converted to these long-range weapons where you have these close-range weapons that have 2 long-range weapons as backup, where normally the 2 long-range weapons wouldn't be able to help out as much if they're not getting constant picks, but because they can just put chunks of damage into targets and the close-range weapons can run up and take those out, or the other long-range weapons can kind of combine fire. It kind of like alleviates the pressure on long-range weapons to overperform in order to make up for their kind of inability to win one-on-ones, where like everything they look at now becomes an easy pick for the rest of the team.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've also got things like the Stingray, which are pretty common on a lot of the commonly picked long-range weapons, which sort of does the same thing. Anyway, so moving on to tower control on Piranha Pit. So this could be the last game of this series. Synergy, of course, leading 2-0. And we'll have to see what has Synergy brought out this. They've got the ballpoint Splatling. Oh boy, here we go. They've also got, of course, the double Stingrays and a custom junior of all things.
Well, the custom junior, it did get that buff. Now, it looks like I'm a little bit behind, unfortunately, for casting, but the custom junior did get that buff where it comes with double auto bomb. You give it like a few subs of sub saver so you can shoot afterwards, and now that thing is going to be spamming auto bombs constantly. It has InkStorm, and honestly, like, people talk about missiles, and you know, like, people are kind of expecting Inkjet to be an important change and stuff with this new patch, but in my opinion, I think Autobomb is the most significant change that came out of this recent patch, because Autobomb weapons went from being kind of crippled by having a sub that they couldn't use, so now having one of the cheapest, most ink-efficient subs possible with really no investment from your gear to make sure that you can throw those. So the fact that the custom junior gets to take a lot of advantage of that, from going from a bad sub to like a really good sub on a weapon that like, kind of pains, can be aggressive, works well with Ninja Squid, stuff like that. I think custom junior has a lot of potential now to be an alternate pick if you really want that InkStorm on a more aggressive weapon.
Yeah, and we just saw that actually, Kaldemar getting taken out by the double auto bomb from Ant. Ant just chucked 2 auto bombs on the tower, and Kaldemar couldn't get away from it in time. So yeah, you can definitely see. So of course, for those not keeping up with the patch notes, the junior Splattershot and the custom junior Splattershot have received a buff where they now have essentially 110 points of ink, and you can see actually already using the Stingray to defend is Oblivion. Resbit, he's dodging and weaving, and he's actually surviving. Okay, so the difficulty now for Oblivion is that even though they've still got the lead here, a lead on this map is like it's very, very unsafe. Like, it's very easy to push past about the sort of 60-point mark, just because of how like the tower path sort of goes through your base first.
Yeah,
and you can kind of see as well that even though they were able to stop that, it was sort of, it seemed as though the tower had only moved like a couple of inches. Actually, as I say that, Clown getting a couple of key picks on the way into Synergy's base there, that I think it was And answering straight back. And now Tim's on the flank with the sloshing machine. Excuse me. And yeah, they can't seem to get rid of him. Like, they've got Oblivion is basically completely surrounded at this point.
Yeah, and it's like what we talked about. We kind of talk about like critical points on a lot of maps, right? Where especially in Rainmaker and Tower Control, where there's a certain point threshold that's really hard to get past because of like the way the map's designed. In this case, the way the map's designed, the tower kind of moves in an area that's super easy to defend and has respawners coming constantly. So you really need to do something to do something a little bit more than normal in order to kind of get the tower past that point. And we see here like with Naz like getting these picks on the sniper, another member of Oblivion going down at the same time. Synergy is getting, they are doing something special to get the picks, but they're not doing it at the exact time that they need to, which is right around this area where they need to push forward to. They need to get picks when the tower is basically at this point in order for them to continue, but it looks like we actually have members of Synergy going down before that. This offensive Stingray not quite working out. Clown does get taken out, which is good, but at what kind of cost? Because now Synergy has to push the tower with people from Oblivion on both sides. The tower gets pincered, and that's going to be the end of this push.
Yeah, you can definitely see the biggest problem there for Synergy is that like they get the picks, but as you say, they don't have control of the tower after all said and done. Tim, for example, stayed alive there for quite a while, getting like a couple of picks on, I believe it was the Tenatech and the Rapid Pro, but they just didn't have control of the tower, so it was all for nothing. Meanwhile, it seems as though Oblivion's doing essentially the same thing right now, except they are getting those relevant picks. They've got the Blaster sitting on the tower, and he's essentially solo pushing now. They're going to be able to jump into him if they want to, or even just swim straight back to the... Oh, and a nice direct on the Junior. It's not... it's going to be cleaned up by Tim with the sloshing machine, of course, but overall, you can see the difference, and this again is something that we highlighted at the start of the series. You can see the difference with Oblivion is slightly more coordinated on where they're getting their picks, and they're making more out of the picks that they're getting. Meanwhile, Synergy, the issue for them is they get, like, they're quite often in a sort of 4v3 situation, but then the people who get taken out are the ones on the tower. They're the ones who are getting, like, escorting the tower, for example. And now you can see, yet again, the Stingray is just cleaning up Synergy, and they can't actually move the tower despite being in such commanding positions.
You know, in my opinion, this map mode combination requires a lot of knowledge of how it works in order to be successful at it. And let's see here, the last tower push, Synergy jumping into tower, Leondab is running up, bombs going off on tower, tower pushing. Ooh, wow. That was just everybody knew that this is the end of the game. Everybody just ran in a straight line towards tower. A bunch of dead bodies piled up on it, and Oblivion barely held that off. So what I was gonna say there was, I think that this map mode is one of those map mode combinations where you really do need knowledge of how it works. You can't just kind of play your normal game. I think that most games will have some sort of map or matchup that just makes you play differently than normal. And I think a little bit of Synergy's, they're kind of like how they go on hiatuses before major tournaments come up kind of thing. I think that kind of was a big part of their weakness there, because you really need to know exactly how to push the tower past that choke point. You need to know how to deal with the flanks that come around behind. And I mean, honestly, like, Synergy, they did two things wrong. They kind of like blew their specials and kind of focused getting picks in times and places that weren't important for that one choke point that we talked about. And when they were pushing, they were never watching their back. So you saw members of Oblivion getting behind tower. We saw that like really nice pincer to defend. And those are kind of, for me, that was indicative of, just Synergy not having quite the experience they need on that map and game mode. I mean, they did the right things, right? They had the Stingray, they had the kind of weapons that would be good there, but they didn't have the knowledge of what to do with it, and that really allowed Oblivion to take advantage and win that game. Now, it was very close, and Synergy almost got the lead at the end when everybody just kind of bum rushed tower, but, Oblivion was commanding of that game mode basically the whole time, which wasn't really the case in some of the other modes that we saw. It's been a lot of back and forth in the other modes, and then Oblivion just lost to one really big push that Synergy pulled off very effectively, whereas this time Oblivion was kind of in a commanding position all game long, and they just never let Synergy get that push.
Well, it's going to be more of the same here on Clan Blitz on Manta Maria. We were just speaking about how, because tower control is sort of one of those modes where you got to be a little bit more coordinated with your pushes, Clan Blitz is that
definitely
to an extreme. Clan Blitz, of course, well known for a lot of cheesy strats, but at the same time, it's probably the mode where coordination is the most important thing. Not just because you need to coordinate your, like, who has clams and who's moving in with what, the power clams and all that, but also because you can see right here. Actually, I think I might be a bit ahead of the stream. Basically, like, it's no good to just go in by yourself and like get 3 kills if there's no power clan following that up, basically.
Yeah, especially on a map like this. Like some maps in Clan Blitz, you can kind of get kills and the clams will kind of naturally find their ways to the basket. But this is one of those maps where the basket is kind of like, it's kind of separated from the rest of the area of play. And I think there's only like 1 or 2 clam spawns that are like within reasonable distance of the goal. So you really need to kind of bring the clams to the firefight that's going to get you scores, as opposed to just kind of like get a bunch of kills and then play objectives. You really need to have to kind of brought the clams there. And Synergy, for the second time, has opened the basket. So they didn't really have the biggest push, but since they had 2, they opened the basket twice. and kind of like kept getting kills. This has allowed them to kind of put a lot of clams in the basket, especially the second time. So while they didn't quite bring the clams to the basket ahead of time, like we were just talking about, the fact they were able to kind of keep slaying and open the basket twice in a row and keep Oblivion back in their base allowed them to kind of get those clams there. What they have to be careful of is they have to be careful of a big push from Oblivion, where Oblivion has like 3 power clams or something like that to start with, just immediately gets the lead, and then starts jumping in, because both those pushes from Synergy that happen, they happen with kind of a low amount of clams to start with. Imagine if they had like multiple power clams leading up to it.
Yeah, and multiple power clams indeed. It looks as though Oblivion knows exactly what they're after right now. They've got 3 power clams stored up and ready. Now it's just a matter of whether they can hold off Synergy. Synergy is doing exactly what they should be doing right now, which is not let those power clams stay in the middle of the map unabated. If Oblivion is wanting to get a baller push going, they're going to have to work damn hard for it, and Synergy is not letting them have their way with the map.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those kind of situations where you have a bunch of power clams, but you're stuck in your base, and it ends up kind of getting you killed because the enemy has knowledge of where you are constantly, and you're trying to get back into the map. It's times like that where sometimes it's okay to just like kind of sacrifice a power clam or two, you know, drop a bunch of them, get to the middle of the map, and oh, here comes the jump.
They've only got 2 power clams though. They've got a couple of extras on lean, but all the kills though, the kills are coming in. Have they got the second power clam? I don't think they did.
I don't think the second power clam might have fallen off the map or something like that. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what happened there. I mean, they definitely jumped with the power clams. I'm not sure why they didn't make it there, but Clown putting in points isn't enough. No, 50 to 44. That's going to be a big penalty on the side of Oblivion because all of those points were scored in one go. Of course, half of what they just put in is going to be their penalty. So they're going to have to get through that 25-point penalty and a greater score than what the current score is in order to catch up. So they're going to have to get another good push going. Ant now in the base of Oblivion. He has 8 clams. Power Clam is jumping in. This is going to be big points if Oblivion doesn't stop it, which it looks like they kind of can't because the only 2 members are alive in the middle of the map. Ant gets killed. Power Clams start going in. Penalty shaved off. 20, 17, 14, 11. These are a lot of points.
Yeah, so you can see sort of right there what happened was pretty much... So Synergy, so we've been saying that Synergy might be a little bit rusty on some of these game modes because they don't necessarily play the game a hell of a lot. But they've been giving us a masterclass on Clam Blitz. When Oblivion had 3 power clams, they were constantly in Oblivion's face, preventing not just the baller from getting in, but also preventing the power clams from even being able to take off on the super jumps. You could see that when Oblivion finally did get in, there were only 2 power clams left, and only one of those even managed to jump. And so
even if it had, look at the score afterwards, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't matter if they got lead.
And while there was a little bit of a fumble on the defense in making sure that all those super jumps got punished properly, at the same time, like you could see, they just immediately turned it around and got another 40 points of their own. And now you can see Oblivion is
the same thing. They're keeping Oblivion in their base, yeah.
Exactly. And now, like, this is exactly how you handle this the super jump pressure from on this mode. And in fact, this is going to be a straight knockout. We don't even need the last 5 seconds of the game. Wait, they just
nobody had a clam.
I thought Naz had an extra power clam. Oh, sorry, an extra normal clam. So yeah, Synergy. That was a very, very strong showing from them right there. I must admit, like that. I was very concerned. Like I was thinking, yeah, this is where Oblivion, I think, gets their act together and makes a game of this. But no, Synergy comes roaring out of the gates with a 3-1 over Oblivion, and that Clam Blitz game, they forget what we said about the lack of coordination. They were doing everything right in that game.
You know, and it's funny, like for a while, the mantra about Clam Blitz has been you have to control the middle of the map, right? And usually that is kind of associated with the fact that you need to have control of the middle for a long enough time to get the clams and then push while you're in a good position. But you also kind of touched on another reason why that holds true so often was because by holding the middle of the map, Oblivion had clams in their base, but since they were locked in their base with basically detection on them, they were constantly echoed basically because they were stuck in the base with power clams. That allowed Synergy with mid-map control to put that pressure on them that stopped any kind of cheesy jump-ins from happening. The one time when it did happen, like we said, it ended up being a partial push where they only had 2 out of their 4 total power clams that they ended up getting during that period go in, and one of them missed anyway, and it didn't matter anyway because the follow-up push from Synergy was so devastating. So just a really good showing of how to play Clan Blitz, of how to use that mid-map control, when to pressure, how to defend, how to attack. It was really good stuff from Synergy.
Absolutely. So with that set over, it sounds as though we've got some interesting things happening elsewhere in the bracket. Deep Blues versus Last Station is currently at 2-2. Now, the winner of this game goes on to play against Ghost Gaming, the newly sponsored European team, formerly known as Team Olive. I'm sure we've got plenty of Team Olive fans in the Twitch chat right now. And of course, Ghost Gaming and Set to Destroy X, conspicuous in their absence yesterday. They were in fact seeded straight into the top 32 bracket, for those who were not keeping up. So, of course, Ghost Gaming and Set to Destroy X are definitely the 2 frontrunners for